Welcome to the flickering shadows of the Middle Ages. Tonight, we slip quietly into a world where the candlelight is dim, the walls are thin, and the night air is heavy with secrets that have long since turned to dust. Take a slow, deep breath. Can you picture it? We are standing on a quiet, muddy street in a medieval village. The rain has just stopped, leaving the scent of damp thatch and drifting wood smoke hanging in the cool air. We are entering an era where desire was considered dangerous. Yet it was omnipresent, hidden behind heavy tapestries and whispered in the safety of the dark. Together, we will walk through the contradictions of a society obsessed with locking lust away, only to watch it slip, inevitably, through the keyhole. The past is gone, and so are today's worries. So, dim the lights. Find a comfortable position where your shoulders can finally drop. Let the noise of the modern world fade, and let us drift back to a time of silence, shadows, and hidden sins. The night here does not fall from the sky. It rises from the earth, thick and heavy, wrapping around the timber frames of the cottages until the village is no longer a collection of buildings, but a single, huddled creature breathing in the cold. Imagine, if you will, that you are standing at the edge of this village. The sun has been gone for hours. The only light comes from the moon, which hangs pale and distant behind a veil of wood smoke, and the faint, dying orange glow escaping from the cracks in the shutters. Now step forward. The ground beneath your boots is uneven, hard-packed earth that has frozen into the shapes of the day's footprints. You can feel the ridges of the mud through your soles. The air is sharp, stinging the tip of your nose, smelling of damp straw, old wool, and the rich, musk-heavy scent of livestock. You are walking into the architecture of intimacy. In our world, we build walls to keep people out. We lock doors to be alone. But here, in this valley, privacy is a luxury that no one can afford, and perhaps no one truly wants. Reach out your hand in the dark. Touch the wall of the nearest cottage. It is rough, textured like a dried riverbed. This is wattle and daub, a woven lattice of hazel branches, plastered over with mud, straw, and animal dung. It dries hard, but it is thin. It is a membrane, not a barrier. If you were to lean your ear against this rough surface, you would hear the life inside. You would hear the low murmur of a conversation by the hearth. You might hear the rhythmic scritch-scratch of a broom on a dirt floor, or the soft, wet sound of dough being kneaded for the morning bread. In this village, silence is shared. Inside that cottage, the space is small. There are no hallways to separate you from your kin. There are no doors to close against a disagreement. The main room is the only room. At night, the fire is banked down to a bed of glowing coals, a red eye, watching over the sleepers. And the sleepers are many. Picture the bed. It is not the solitary mattress of the modern world. It is a vast landscape of straw and linen, raised off the cold floor. The entire family sleeps here. The parents, the children, the infants. They lie in a tangle of limbs, a heap of human warmth. It is a survival strategy. The winter nights here are brutal, reaching fingers of frost through the thatched roof. Alone you shiver. Together you survive. The heat of one body borrows from the heat of another. And often, they are not just sharing warmth with each other. Listen closely. Do you hear that low, shifting sound? The heavy, rhythmic chewing? The prize cow is sleeping just on the other side of a thin wooden partition. The goats are huddled in the corner. Their body heat rises, mingling with the heat of the fire, thickening the air. The cottage smells of life intense, close, and safe. But where? You might wonder, in this crowded breathing box, does love find a place to exist? The church, with its stone tower looming at the end of the muddy lane, has very strict rules about love. The priest reads from his book about purity, about waiting, about the sanctity of the marriage bed. But the villagers know something the priest pretends to forget. Winter is long, and blood is warm. Turn away from the cottage now. Walk past the sleeping garden, where the kale stands stiff with frost. Walk toward the barn at the edge of the field. The barn is the true cathedral of the village. Night. Slide the heavy door open, just a crack. Slip inside. The air here is different. It is warmer, sweeter. It smells of dried clover, timothy grass, and the dusty, golden scent of hay. It is quiet here, but it is a soft quiet cushioned by the stacked harvest. This is where the courtship happens. This is where the rules of the stone church soften into the rules of the earth. Imagine a young couple meeting here. They have slipped away from the crowded fireside, away from the listening ears of parents and siblings. They have found a hollow in the hayloft, high up near the rafters where the heat gathers. They are practicing an ancient custom, older than the church bells. They call it hand fasting. It is a simple thing. There is no parchment, no ink, no Latin. There is only the clasping of hands. A ribbon, perhaps, or a piece of cord, tied gently around their wrists in a figure -8. It is a promise. A trial. In the eyes of the village, they are now bound for a year and a day. It is a sensible arrangement for a sensible people. If the year passes and the bond is strong, they will go to the church door. If not, they will untie the knot and walk away. No shame, no debt. The church calls this sin. The village calls it life. There is a peace in this pragmatism. It reminds us that humans have always found ways to carve out space for themselves. Even in a world where the walls are made of mud and the neighbors are always listening, desire finds a quiet corner. Sit down on a bale of hay in the darkness. Let your eyes adjust. You can hear the wind outside, whistling around the eaves, searching for a way in. But it cannot reach you here. You are insulated by the harvest around you. The village is settling into the deepest part of the night. The candles have all been blown out. The last embers are fading. The open secrets of the village are tucking themselves in. The parents know the young couple is in the barn. The neighbors know who is visiting whom. There is no judgment in the dark, only the collective understanding that everyone is trying to stay warmed out. Listen to the rhythm of the village sleeping. It is a slow, steady pulse. The creak of a timber settling in the cold. The hoot of an owl from the oak tree in the churchyard. The distant bark of a dog. Answered by silence. There is no privacy here, true. But there is also no loneliness. You are part of a living organism, a web of connections that stretches from the hearth to the hayloft, from the cradle to the grave. You are held by this proximity. You are watched over by it. The anxiety of being alone, of being forgotten, does not exist here. If you were to call out, a dozen voices would answer, but you do not need to call out. You only need to rest. Let the image of the cottage fade. Let the smell of the wood smoke drift away. Let the rough texture of the wattle wall smooth out under your hand. The village has been here for 1,000 years, and it will be here when the sun rises. The stories of the night, the hand fasting, the whispers, the shared warmth are safe in the keeping of the dark. You are safe too. Wrapped in the heavy, comforting blanket of history, you can let go of the need to be separate. You can let go of the need to hide. The night is calm. The barn is warm. The world is asleep. And soon you will be too. Asterisk, asterisk. If the village is a place of warmth and tangled limbs, the church is a place of cold geometry, where the chaotic human heart is measured against the rigid, unyielding line of stone. Step away from the mud of the lane now. Push open the heavy oak door of the church. It swings inward on iron hinges that have not been oiled in a century, letting out a low, groaning sigh that echoes into the rafters. You step inside. The air changes instantly. It is cooler here, still and heavy, smelling of beeswax candles that have burned down to nothing. and the faint, metallic scent of the censer. The darkness is vast. The ceiling is lost in shadow. Walk down the center aisle. Your boots make a rhythmic sound on the flagstones. Tap, tap, a lonely sound that emphasizes the scale of the room. This space was built to make you feel small. It was built to silence the noise of the outside world. Make your way to the front, to the lectern near the altar. There, resting in the dim light of a single votive candle, lies a book dot. It is a massive object. The cover is bound in cracked leather, reinforced with brass corners. It looks like a shield. Reach out in your mind and open it. The pages are heavy vellum calfskin stiff and textured under your fingertips. They make a dry, crackling sound as you turn them. This is a penitential. It is not a book of stories. It is a book of lists. It is a manual of bureaucracy applied to the soul dot in the medieval mind. Sin was not a vague feeling of guilt. It was a legal debt. And like any debt, it had to be calculated, weighed, and paid. The monks who wrote these books were the accountants of the afterlife. Look at the columns of ink. They are dense, written in a tight, scratching Latin script that leaves no room for white space. The obsession with categorization is hypnotic. They did not just list adultery or theft. They broke human behavior down into microscopic fragments. Here is a rule for kissing with intent. Here is a rule for kissing without intent. Here is a rule for a thought that lingers. Too long in the morning. Here is the sign of the eyes, the act of looking at something you should not see. The list goes on and on, page after page, covering every possible permutation of touch and desire. There are rules for which days of the week a husband and wife may lie together. Not on Sundays, not on Wednesdays, not on Fridays, not during Lent, not during Advent, not before a feast day. It is exhaustive. It is exhausting. Imagine the mindset that created this. It is a desperate attempt to build a dam against the river of human instinct. They believed that if they could just name every single thing that could go wrong, they could control it. They tried to legislate the beating of a heart. Run your finger down the list of penances. 7 days on bread and water. 3 years of fasting. A pilgrimage to a shrine 3 valleys away. There is a strange rhythmic monotony to it all. It feels less like religion and more like mathematics. If X, then Y. It turns the wild, unpredictable storm of human relationships into a quiet, orderly ledger. But as you stand here in the silence, reading the dry ink, you begin to feel the futility of it. The book is heavy, but the life outside is heavier. You can imagine the priest standing here, reading these rules to a parishioner who spends their days herding sheep in the rain. The distance between the ink on the page and the mud on the boots is immense. The priest asks the questions from the book. The parishioner answers. The penance is assigned. It becomes a ritual, a cycle as reliable as the seasons. The sign happens. The guilt is measured. The debt is paid. The slate is wiped clean, only to be written on again the next day. There is a comfort in this repetition. It implies that everything can be fixed. It implies that there is a solution for every mistake, a number for every sorrow. But the book cannot hold it all. Listen to the church around you. The stone walls are thick, but they are not silent. They hold the echoes of 1,000 whispered confessions. They hold the sighs of generations of people who tried to follow the rules and failed and tried again. The penitential sits on the lectern, grand and imposing, but it is just paper. It is just ink. It is a monument to the human desire for order in a chaotic world. You can close the book now. Let the heavy cover fall back into place with a soft thud that disperses the dust motes in the candlelight. The rules are safely shut away. The accounting is finished for the night. Step back from the altar. The darkness of the nave feels softer now, less judgmental. The structure of the church is rigid, but the space inside is empty and peaceful. You are not bound by the lists on those pages. You are not waiting for a penance. You are simply a witness, standing in the quiet aftermath of a century of worry. Turn and walk back down the aisle. The sound of your footsteps is slower now, unhurried. You pass the stone pillars that hold up the roof. They have carried that weight for 500 years, so you don't have to. Push the door open and step out. The cool night air hits your face, smelling of rain and earth. The village is sleeping. The complex, impossible rules of the penitential are locked inside the stone. Outside, there is only the wind, the moon, and the freedom of the dark. You can rest now. The audit is over. The silence of the cloister is not empty. It is a heavy, velvet curtain that you must push aside to enter. A physical weight that rests against the stone walls and settles into the folds of a wool robe. Walk with me now through a heavy oak gate, studded with iron nails. You are entering the monastery. The air here is different from the village and the church. It is still. It smells of beeswax, dry parchment, and the faint, sweet smoke of incense that is burned down to nothing hours ago. The world has suddenly become very geometric, a square of manicured grass, surrounded by a square of covered walkways, surrounded by the high, vertical walls of the monastery. The horizon is gone. There is only the stone and the sky. Walk along the corridor. Listen to the sound of your own footsteps. In the village, your feet sank into mud or crunched on straw. Here, on the flagstones, every step is an announcement. Clack, clack. The echo travels down the hallway, bouncing off the arches. A lonely sound that emphasizes the solitude. This is the architecture of discipline. But as we have seen in the village, stone walls cannot filter out the human heart. You stop outside a cell door. Inside, a monk sits by a single candle. He is awake, though the bell for matins has not yet rung. We often imagine these men as statues, carved from the same gray rock as their church, void of feeling, void of want. But history whispers a different story. It tells us that the habit did not unmake the man. Beneath the rough scratch of the wool tunic, the blood still pumped. The memory of a touch, or the sound of a laugh from the village market, could drift over these high walls like pollen on the wind. And so, the church, in its immense, pragmatic wisdom found a way to monetize the impossible. There is a ledger on a desk in the bishop's palace, miles away from here. If you were to open it, running your finger down the columns of ink, you would find a curious entry. It is a tax, listed alongside the tithes for grain and the sales of timber. It is called the kilagium, the concubine tax. It is a dry, bureaucratic solution to a deeply emotional problem. The church hierarchy knew that many of its priests and monks could not bear the crushing weight of total isolation. They knew there were women, housekeepers, sisters, hidden companions living in the shadows of the rectory. Instead of fighting a war they could not win, the bishop simply sent a bill. Imagine the monk counting out coins in the dim light. There is a strange, quiet dignity in this transaction. He is paying a fine to be human. He is buying a small allowance of warmth in a cold world. The coins clink together, a sharp, metallic sound, and with that payment, the secret is kept. The silence of the monastery remains unbroken, but it is a shared silence now. A conspiracy of tolerance. Let us drift away from the monastery now. Across the valley, to where the convent stands. Here, the silence has a different texture. It is softer, perhaps, but the longing is just as sharp. You are standing in the scriptorium of the nunnery. It is daytime in this memory, and the light streams in through narrow windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. A nun is bent over a desk. She is copying a psalter, her hand steady, the quill scratching rhythmically against the sheepskin parchment. For the women here, there was no concubine tax. There was no buying a secret life. The walls of the convent were absolute dot, but the human need for connection is like water. If it cannot flow outward, it flows upward. Get Deepin's dot look closely at what she is writing. The main text is Latin liturgy ancient, rigid and holy. But look at the margins dot in the borders of these illuminated manuscripts. We find the true history of their hearts. A tiny drawing of a bird trapped in a vine. A flower painted with impossible delicacy. Its petals unfolding in a riot of red and blue that stands out against the stark black ink. Historians tell us that the intense, romantic language of the medieval mystics, the brides of Christ, was often a sublimation. If they could not love a man of flesh, they would love the divine with a passion that was startlingly physical. Consider Hildegard of Bingen, the great mystic. She wrote of burning, of piercing, of being ravished by spirit. She described the divine light as a living fire that entered her dot. It was desire, transmuted into something that could survive behind stone walls. Imagine the woman pausing in her work. She rubs a cramp from her hand. She looks out the window at the same moon that the plowman and his lover are watching. She cannot go to the hayloft. She cannot pay the tax dot, so she dips her quill into the inkpot. And in the corner of the page, she draws a single perfect heart. She hides her secret in plain sight, tucking it between the psalms, where it will wait for centuries dot. The intensity of their lives feels heavy to us, perhaps. But there is peace here, too. Listen to the ambient sound of the convent at night. The wind hums through the stone cloisters, a low, mournful note like a blown glass bottle. It is a lullaby of solitude. There is a freedom in this structure. In the village, there is chaos, noise, the constant demand of survival. Here, there is only the rhythm. The bell rings. You wake. You pray. The bell rings. You eat. The bell rings. You sleep. The decisions are made for you. The burden of choice is lifted. You can feel that lifting now, in your own shoulders. The complexity of the world outside, the taxes, the rules, the need to explain yourself, does not exist in this stone chamber dot. You are simply here. You are a witness. The monk has paid his coin and blown out his candle. The nun has closed her book, trapping the painted flower in darkness. The secrets are safe. The silence has returned, filling the hallways like rising water, cool and cleansing. There is nothing left to do. The stone walls are thick. They hold up the roof so you don't have to. The night has lasted for 1,000 years, and it is patient enough to last 1,000 more. Let the echo of your footsteps fade. Let the smell of incense drift away. You are floating in the quiet, wrapped in the heavy, protective stillness of a time that has long since been forgiven. Rest in the silence. It is yours now. If the peasant's cottage is built of necessity, the high court is built of performance's stage, where silt and stone are arranged to frame the most delicate and dangerous game of the age. You have left the mud of the village behind now. You have climbed the winding, treacherous road to the fortress that overlooks it all. The air up here is thinner, sharper. But once you pass the portcullis and the guards, and ascend the spiral stairs to the private quarters, the world softens. You are stepping into the solar, the private room of the Lord, and Lady Dot noticed the change in the acoustics immediately. In the peasant's cottage, the wind howled through the cracks. In the church, your footsteps echoed against cold stone. But here, the walls are dressed. Heavy tapestries, woven with wool and silk, hang from floor to ceiling. They depict hunting scenes, mythical beasts, and gardens that never fade. Reach out in your mind and touch one. The fabric is thick, dusty, and dense. It absorbs the sound. It holds the warmth of the fire. It wraps the room in a permanent, muffled hush. This is the world of the nobility. And it is here, amidst the luxury, that we find the theater of courtly love. Imagine the room is lit by a dozen beeswax candles, far more expensive than the tallow dips of the village. The light is golden and steady. Sitting near the hearth is a lady. She is dressed in layers of silk that rustle like dry leaves whenever she moves. And across the room, standing respectfully in the shadows, is a knight. He is not her husband. In this era, marriage among the nobility is a business transaction, a merging of lands, a signing of treaties. It has very little to do with the heart. And so, the heart found a different outlet. The knight recites a poem. He sings a song, perhaps accompanied by the gentle, plucking sound of a lute. He speaks of a love that burns but does not touch. He speaks of service, of wearing her favor a sleeve, a ribbon into battle. This was courtly love. It was the art of pining. It was a ritual where desire was placed on a pedestal, admired from afar, but never supposedly acted upon. It turned longing into a spectator sport. But consider the atmosphere of this room. It feels intimate, does it not? Yet, look closer into the corners. The lady is never alone. Privacy, which the peasants lacked because of poverty, the nobles lacked because of power. A noble woman is an asset of the state. She is watched. Her ladies-in-waiting sit on stools nearby, embroidering, their needles flashing in the firelight. Servants stand by the door, quiet as furniture. A page boy tends the fire. In the peasant's hayloft, the darkness provided a cover. Here, there is no darkness. There are only eyes. This creates a tension that hangs in the air, heavier than the scent of the roasted meats and imported spices. Every glance between the knight and the lady is catalogued. Every word is weighed, and yet history tells us that the human heart is a clever thing. The historical fact of these courts is that the performance often masked a reality. The songs were codes. The poems held double meanings. Imagine the subtle thrill in it. The knight hands the lady a goblet of wine. Their fingers brush for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. To the ladies-in-waiting, it looks like clumsy service. To the two of them, it is a conversation. They lived in a world of high stakes, where a rumor could start a war. And so, they became masters of the microscopic. A look held across the great hall during a feast became a vow. A sigh became a speech. The paradox here is profound. They romanticized suffering. They wrote endless ballads about the pain of being apart, about the sweetness of unrequited love. But at the same time, the actual mechanism of their lives' marriage was utterly devoid of romance. Let us look at the other side of this golden coin. While the knight sings of eternal devotion, the lady's father is in another room, signing a contract that treats her like a piece of livestock. The dowry is listed in ink. 6 silver spoons, a feather bed, a plot of land, 3 cows, a chest of linens. Her worth is calculated in objects. Her purity is inspected by older female relatives with a clinical coldness that makes the poetry in the solar seem like a desperate fantasy. It is a jarring contrast. In the solar, she is a goddess, worshipped from afar. In the counting room, she is property, transferred from one man to another. This is the tension that defined their lives. The dream of love versus the reality of power. It feels exhausting to think of it now, the constant vigilance, the stiff brocade of the clothes, the weight of the jewelry. But there is a strange peace in observing it from this distance, because tonight the solar is empty. The night has been dust for 500 years. The lady has been forgotten. The songs of the troubadours have faded into the rafters. Walk to the window of the solar. It is a narrow slit in the thick stone, designed for an archer, but now it frames the moon. Look down at the world below. You can see the dark shape of the monastery. You can see the faint outline of the peasant village. From up here, The differences between them seem very small. The peasant in the hayloft, the monk in his cell, the lady in her silk, they were all just looking for the same thing. They were all trying to find a moment of warmth in a cold century. They were all trying to love and be loved before the winter came. The tapestry on the wall stirs slightly as a draft finds its way through the stone. The movement is gentle, like a heavy breath. The castle is sleeping now. The guards at the gate have leaned their spears against the wall and closed their eyes. The surveillance has ended. The judgment has passed. The silk has rotted away, and the gold has been lost, but the quiet remains. It is a deep, historical quiet, the kind that only comes after all the songs have been sung and all the secrets have been kept. You are standing in the center of that quiet. You are wrapped in the safety of the past, where nothing can hurt you, where no one is watching, and where the only task left is to close your eyes and let the centuries drift by like clouds across the moon. Rest now in the shadow of the stone. The court is dismissed. The cold wind of the high castle and the silent discipline of the monastery are behind you now. For the night has one last refuge, found only by following the cobblestones down the narrowest alleys. Toward a door painted in a deep, peeling red dot, stop for a moment before you enter. The air in this alleyway is different. It does not smell of the freezing mud or the sharp incense of the nave. It smells of something damp, sweet, and overwhelmingly human. It smells of rosewater, wood smoke, and steam. Push the heavy door open. It swings inward on well-oiled hinges, making no sound. Instantly, the world dissolves into white. You have stepped into the bathhouse. In a time when the river was freezing and firewood was a luxury, this place was a sanctuary of heat. The room is cavernous, built of stone that sweats with condensation. Water drips from the arched ceiling asterisk, plip, plip, plip asterisk, landing in the pools below with a rhythmic, hypnotic splashing. The air here is thick and heavy. It wraps around you like a wet wool blanket, instantly loosening the tension in your shoulders. The cold grip of the medieval winter cannot reach you here. Through the mist, you see shapes. Rows of large wooden tubs, bound in iron hoops, are filled with steaming water. In them sit the people of the city. This is a place of profound social magic. Outside, on the street, a merchant wears velvet and a laborer wears rough spun. A knight carries a sword. A clerk carries a pen. But here, stripped of their tunics and their tools, stripped of the heraldry that tells the world who they are just men. The steam is the great equalizer. It blurs the lines between class and station until there is only the pink flush of skin and a sigh of relief. Listen to the sounds of the room. There is low laughter, soft and echoing. The sound of water being poured from a bucket. The scrub of a rough brush against a back. It is a soundscape of care. But as you walk deeper into the warmth, past the tubs and toward the private chambers in the back, we encounter one of the most fascinating contradictions of the medieval mind. You might think that the church, the same church that wrote the penitentials and preached from the stone pulpits, would want to burn this place down. You might think the priests would stand outside with torches, condemning the flesh, but history is rarely so simple. If you were to look at the deed for this building, or check the ledger where the profits are recorded, you would see a seal in the wax. It is not the seal of a criminal. It is the seal of a bishop. This is the historical fact that sits quietly in the steam. The church did not just tolerate these places. They often owned them. They called it a necessary evil. A great theologian once compared it to a sewer in a palace unpleasant to think about. Perhaps but remove it, and the whole palace becomes filthy. They believed that without these red doors, the desires of men would spill over into the streets, endangering the respectable wives and daughters we saw earlier. So, the church became the landlord of pleasure. There is something strangely pragmatic, almost comforting, in this hypocrisy. It suggests that the people in charge knew, deep down, that the rules they wrote were impossible to keep. They knew that the body has needs that the soul cannot pray away. Imagine a priest walking through this room. He is here to collect the rent. He walks through the steam, his heavy robes dampening in the mist. He nods to the abbess, the woman who runs the house. She hands him a pouch of coins. The coins are warm from the heat of the room. He does not lecture her. She does not confess to him. It is simply business. The sacred and the profane are shaking hands in the fog dot, move past them now, to the edge of the water. The atmosphere here is not one of guilt, but of release. For the men sitting in these tubs, the bathhouse is a place where the heavy armor of masculinity can be taken off dot in the world outside. They must be stoic. They must be fathers, soldiers, masters. But here, submerged to the chin in hot water, smelling of thyme and lavender thrown in to mask the city's stench, they are allowed to be soft. They close their eyes. They tilt their heads back against the wet wood. The red door is not just an entrance to a brothel. It is a portal to a place where the relentless surveillance of the village stops. The bundling board is gone. The dowry contract is forgotten. The eye of the village gossip is blinded by the steam dot. There is only the heat dot. Feel that heat now in your own imagination. It radiates from the stones, seeping into your bones. It softens the hard edges of history. The dampness feels cleansing, washing away the dust of the road and the soot of the fire. The details of the room begin to fade. The wooden tubs become vague shapes. The voices of the bathers drop to a murmur, blending with the sound of the dripping water until it sounds like a gentle rain. The contradiction of the bishop and the brothel doesn't matter anymore. The laws and the taxes don't matter. What remains is the water has no memory. It holds no judgment. It simply holds you. It buoyed the peasant and the prince alike, offering them both the same simple mercy of a warm hour in a cold life. You are floating in that mercy now. The mist is closing in, white and soft and silent. The red door is closed and barred against the wind. The fire beneath the copper boiler is banking down for the night. The city outside has fallen asleep, and the steam is carrying you up, lighter than air, drifting away from the earth, away from the past into the deep, warm quiet of the dark. The fears of the night often lead to the desperate remedies of the morning, and if you follow the scent of dried sage and crushed amber, you will find yourself standing in the cluttered, dusty silence of the apothecary's workshop. Step inside. The air here is completely different from the damp stone of the castle or the steam of the bathhouse. It is dry, acrid, and thick with the suspension of 1,000 ground-up roots. It smells of earth that has been pulled from the ground and forced to give up its secrets. On the shelves around you, climbing high into the shadows of the rafters, are rows of ceramic jars and glass bottles. Some are clear, revealing withered leaves or floating, pale shapes preserved in brine. Others are opaque, sealed with wax, hiding their contents from the light. This is the laboratory of medieval sex ed. To understand this room, you must first unlearn everything you know about biology. You must forget about hormones, about blood pressure, about the nervous system. In this era, the human body was not a machine of mechanics and chemistry. It was a garden of humors, a mysterious enclosed landscape where fluids rose and fell like tides, governed by the moon and the stars. And when that garden failed to bloom, when desire withered, or when a lineage was at risk, they did not turn to science. They turned to sympathy. Pick up a small jar from the table. It is light, almost empty. Inside is a pinch of gray powder. The label, written in a cramped, scratching hand, might claim this is the cure for a cold marriage. It is the crushed bodies of Spanish flies, iridescent green beetles. The logic was simple, poetic, and entirely wrong. The beetle causes a burning sensation. Therefore, it must cause passion. They mistook irritation for desire. They tried to ignite a fire by striking a match against the skin itself. Put the jar down. Pick up another. This one contains something even stranger. Sparrow brains. It seems horrifying to us now. A detail from a witch's spell. But consider the medieval observer. They watched the sparrow in the hedgerow chirping, fluttering, mating with endless, frantic energy. They believed that if you consumed the sparrow, you would consume its nature. You would borrow its energy. It was a form of magical thinking. It was a desperate hope that the world outside could fix the broken world inside. But there are darker things on these shelves. Move your hand to the heavy, stoneware jug at the back of the bench. It contains mercury. Quicksilver. Pour a drop in your mind. Watch it pool on the wood, shivering, impossible to hold, beautiful and deadly. They drank this. They applied it to their skin. In their search for a cure for the French pox, syphilis, or in their quest to balance the body's humors, they poisoned themselves slowly, day by day. There is a tragedy in this room. You can feel it hanging in the stillness. It is the tragedy of people who wanted to be well, who wanted to be loved, but who were walking through a dark forest without a map. They trusted the apothecary because they had no one else. But the confusion was not limited to potions. It extended to the very architecture of the body itself. Let us look at a diagram spread out on the workbench. It is an anatomical drawing, but the proportions are all wrong. The organs are floating in empty space, and here we find the historical fact that feels most like a dream. The wandering womb. For centuries, the learned men of medicine men, who had never looked inside a living body, believed that the uterus was an animal. They believed it had a mind of its own. If a woman was anxious, or faint, or hysterical, it was because her womb had become bored or unhappy and had decided to go for a walk. They believed it could float up into the chest, pressing on the heart. It could rise to the throat, choking the breath. Imagine the anxiety of living in a body that you were told was not fully yours, a body that contained a restless passenger, and the cure? It was based on smell. If the womb had wandered up to the throat, the apothecary would wave foul-smelling salts under the woman's nose-burnt feathers. Sulfur, rotting things to scare the organ back down. Conversely, they would place sweet-smelling sachets of lavender and rose at the other end, to lure it back to its proper place. It is a theory of almost childlike simplicity. It treats the body like a stubborn pet. But as you stand here, surrounded by the smell of burnt feathers and dried flowers, try not to laugh. Try instead to feel the immense, quiet weight of the unknown that pressed down on them. They were trying to make sense of the invisible. They felt things they could not name: depression, anxiety, infertility, desire, and they built stories to explain them. The wandering womb was a story. The sparrow brain was a story. The mercury was a story. They were the fables we told ourselves before we learned the language of cells. And there is a comfort in knowing that the story is over. Look around the shop one last time. The dust is settling on the jars. The beetles are just dust. The mercury is corked tight. The wandering womb has been anchored by knowledge. We know now that we are whole. We know that our parts do not leave us. We know that our feelings are electrical storms in the brain, not the movements of ghosts or the lack of bird meat. You can feel that certainty settling into your own bones. You are not a mystery to be solved. You are not a problem to be fixed with powders and chants. You are a biological reality, steady and grounded. The desperation that filled this room has evaporated. The panic of the past has been replaced by the calm rhythm of understanding. Blow out the candle on the apothecary's bench. Watch the smoke curl up toward the ceiling, twisting like a gray snake before it disappears. The shop is dark now. The jars are just shadows. The strange, frantic search for a cure has ended. Leave the room. Close the door on the strange history of our ignorance. You are stepping back into the corridor, back into the safety of the present moment. You are healthy. You are whole. You are safe. And the only medicine you need now is the heavy, sweet, natural elixir of sleep. The darkness of the medieval night is not merely the absence of light. It is a crowded room, filled with the shifting shapes of things that have no bodies, but possess a terrible weight. Lie back against the bolster now. The heavy wool blanket is pulled up to your chin, scratching slightly against your neck. The room is cold, a deep, penetrating chill that seems to emanate from the stone walls themselves. You have blown out the tallow candle. The scent of the extinguished wick hangs in the air, a sharp, acrid reminder that the light has failed. You are safe from the wolves in the forest. You are safe from the bandits on the road. The heavy oak door is barred, but in the medieval mind, the locked door was no protection against the things that could walk through walls. This is where the history of guilt becomes a history of ghosts. To understand the sleeper of this era, you must understand that they did not see the mind as we do. They did not know about the subconscious. They did not know about neurons firing in the dark to process the day's memories. To them, the mind was a vessel. And at night, when the will was asleep, that vessel was open. If a thought entered your head in the darkness, a forbidden thought, a flash of desire, a memory of a touch, it was not seen as a stray firing of the brain. It was seen as an intruder. Enter the mythology of the incubus and the succubus. We know these names from horror stories now, but back then they were not monsters under the bed. They were explanations. They were the medieval attempt to make sense of the body's own betrayal. Imagine waking up in the dead of night. The room is pitch black. You feel a weight on your chest. You cannot move. Your heart is hammering against your ribs. This is what we now call sleep paralysis, a simple glitch in the sleep cycle. But to the person lying in this bed 500 years ago, this was a demon. It was a demon sitting on their chest, trying to steal their soul through the act of intimacy. It is a terrifying thought, but look at it with the soft, empathetic gaze of history. It is also deeply sad. It reveals a society so afraid of its own nature that it had to invent monsters to explain away a natural bodily reaction. They could not accept that they were human, so they blamed the supernatural. This fear was not limited to the bedroom. It seeped into the village square, into the neighbor's glance. If a cow stopped giving milk, or a child fell ill with fever, or a husband's eye wandered, the cause was often sought in the shadows. Folk magic was the shield against this invisible war. People carried charms, a piece of parchment with a prayer scrawled on it, sewn into their clothes. They hung iron horseshoes over their doors. They whispered rhymes to secure love or to turn away the evil eye. But sometimes, the fear demanded a target. This brings us to the darkest shadow of all, the witch trials. We often think of these trials as being about magic, but look closer at the accusations. They were almost always sexual. The witch was accused of copulating with the devil. She was accused of stealing men's potency. She was accused of the very things that the village feared and desired in equal measure. It was a projection of collective anxiety. The witch became the container for everything that could not be said aloud. Imagine the psychological weight of living in this world. You had to guard your body during the day, and you had to guard your soul during the night. You were never truly safe, but listen to the wind outside the window again. It howls around the corner of the house, rattling the shutters. That wind has been blowing for centuries. It blew while they worried about demons. It blew while they whispered charms. And it is blowing now, long after those fears have turned to dust. The incubi and succubi have evaporated. Science has shone a light into the corners of the room. and we found nothing there but dust bunnies and old shoes. We know now that the weight on the chest is just the body resting. We know that the dream of desire is just the mind sorting through the files of being human now. There is a profound relief in this knowledge. You can lie in this bed, in this darkness, and know that you are alone. And being alone is a gift. The demons were never real. They were just shadows cast by a candle that burned too bright with guilt. And now that the candle is out, the shadows are gone too. The interrogation is over. No one is waiting to accuse you. No one is keeping a ledger of your sleeping thoughts. The medieval sleeper had to fight a war every night. You do not. You have the luxury of peace. Got the tension drain out of your chest. The weight you feel is just the heaviness of the blanket, keeping you warm. The sound you hear is just the settling of the house. The darkness is not a presence. It is a canvas, blank and soft, and waiting. You are free to dream of whatever you wish. You are free to drift into the strange, nonsensical, beautiful world of sleep without fear of judgment. The door is locked. The world is outside. The past is a story that cannot touch you. Close your eyes. Let the heavy books of the witch hunters snap shut. Let the stone walls dissolve into mist. There is nothing in the dark but sleep. Deep, quiet, innocent sleep. The library is not just a place of words. It is a place of hiding, where the most dangerous secrets are tucked away, not in the locked chests, but in the open white space where the ink fades into silence. Come back with me to the scriptorium. The hour is late. The other monks have gone to their cells, their sandals slapping softly against the stone floors until the sound disappeared down the corridor. You are alone here, surrounded by the smell of oak gall ink, the dust of crushed gemstones used for pigment, and the dry, animal scent of vellum skins stretching over wooden boards. A single candle remains burning. Its flame is small, a tiny island of gold in a sea of shadow. Pull a heavy manuscript toward you. It is a psalter, a book of holy songs meant to be chanted in the choir. The text in the center is rigid, perfect, and black. It speaks of law, of judgment, of the eternal order of things. But look to the edges. Look to the margins dot here. Hidden in plain sight, we find the true heartbeat of the medieval world dot. We tend to think of these scribes as stern, humorless men, terrified of God and the abbot. But the margins tell a different story. They tell us that the human mind, when bored or oppressed, will always find a way to play. Trace the edge of the page with your finger. What do you see? There, sketched in fine red ink, is a rabbit. But it is not a gentle rabbit. It is standing on its hind legs, holding a sword, hunting a dog. Turn the page. There is a snail, painted with exquisite care. And facing the snail is a knight in full armor, dropping his sword in terror. It is a joke. A meme from 500 years ago. It is the monk laughing at the seriousness of his own world, mocking the bravery of knights, turning the natural order upside down because, for a few hours in this quiet room, he can. These marginalia are the graffiti of the soul. They are the small, subversive winks that say, asterisk, I am here. I am bored. I am alive. Asterisk. There are drawings of nuns riding on the backs of flying fish. There are grotesque faces sticking their tongues out at the holy text. There are intricate knots that turn into dragons biting their own tails. It is delightful to discover them. It feels like catching someone giggling in church. It reminds us that people have always been people, irreverent, creative, and desperate to leave a mark that says they existed. But as you turn the pages deeper into the book, the margins begin to hold something heavier than jokes. They begin to hold the things that could not be said aloud. In a world where the rules for love were written in stone, where marriage was a transaction and celibacy was a mandate, where did the heart go? It went into the code. It went into the silence. History has often been written as if everyone in the past followed the rules. But we know that desire is like water. It will find a crack, and often that crack was found in the intense, isolated world of the monastery or the convent. Imagine a monk sitting at this very desk. He is writing a letter to a brother in another abbey. The abbot will read this letter. The world will see it. So he writes about spiritual friendship. He uses the language of the soul. He writes about how their spirits are intertwined, how they are one in God, how his heart aches when they are apart. To the censor, it looks like piety. To the recipient, it reads like a love letter. I am present in spirit, he writes, though absent in body. It is a beautiful, heartbreaking dance. They carved out a sanctuary within the words themselves. They used the approved language of the church to express a love that the church would have condemned. We see this in the convents. 2. We find letters between nuns that burn with an intensity that transcends mere sisterhood. They speak of sweetness, of burning charity, of a bond that death cannot sever. Was it friendship? Was it romance? The modern need to label everything, to put it in a box, does not fit here. In the candlelight of the scriptorium, the lines were blurred. It was intimacy. It was the profound, life-saving connection of two people who found each other in the dark. There is a specific kind of bravery in this. It is the bravery of the flower growing through the pavement. They did not burn down the monastery. They simply lived their truth in the margins. Look again at the page in front of you. In the bottom corner, almost faded away by time, someone has written a single name. And next to it, another name. There is no explanation, no story. Just two names resting side by side in the vellum, touching for eternity. The ink has turned brown. The hands that wrote it are dust. But the feeling remains. You can feel the quiet triumph of it. They got away with it. The oppressive laws, the penance parades, the lectures on sin, none of it could stop the ink from flowing. None of it could stop the thought from being thought. It makes the heavy atmosphere of the Middle Ages feel lighter, doesn't it? It makes the stone walls feel less like a prison and more like a shell, hiding a soft, living center. You are sitting in that center now. The book is still open. The rabbit is still chasing the dog. The names are still together. The humor and the love have outlasted the judgment. And you, too, have your own margins. You have the quiet corners of your mind where you keep the things that are yours alone. The day is for the world, for the rules, for the work, for the noise. But the night is your marginalia. The night is where you can be yourself, unobserved and unjudged. Run your hand over the page one last time. The parchment is cool and smooth. It feels peaceful. Close the heavy wooden cover. Thump. The sound is soft, like a heartbeat. The secrets are safe inside. Blow out the candle. The scriptorium goes dark. The smell of the smoke drifts up into the rafters, joining the centuries of prayers and whispers that have gathered there. The library is sleeping. The monks are sleeping. The lovers and the jokers are all at rest. You are part of that rest now. You are hidden in the plain sight of the darkness, covered by the silence, safe in the margins of the night. Sometimes the dawn brings a harsh, gray light that drags the shadows out from the corners and into the open square for everyone to see. Leave the quiet scriptorium behind. We are moving outside now. The air has changed. It is no longer the sweet, smoky scent of incense or the dry dust of the library. It is the smell of rain on cold cobblestones, a sharp, metallic scent that clears the head and chills the skin. You are standing in the village square. It is early morning. The sun is hidden behind a blanket of low clouds, casting a flat, pale light over the timber-framed houses. Usually, this space is filled with the noise of the market, the haggling of merchants, the clucking of chickens, the rolling of cartwheels. But today, the stalls are empty. The square is quiet. People are gathering, but they are not speaking. They stand in clusters near the church steps, their breath misting in the cold air, their arms crossed over their chests for warmth. They are waiting. They are here to witness the theater of morality. They are here for the procession. The heavy oak doors of the church swing open with a groan that echoes off the stone facades. And from the darkness of the nave, a figure emerges. It is a woman. Or perhaps a man the law of penance came for everyone eventually. But let us imagine a figure stripped of the protections of their daily life. They are not wearing the heavy wool tunic or the fur-lined cloak that signals their station. They are dressed in a simple, white shift-thin linen that flutters weakly in the wind. Or perhaps they are barefoot, their skin pale and vulnerable against the dark. Unyielding earth. This is the penance parade. It is a ritual as old as the stones themselves. Watch as they take the first step. Slap, the sound of a bare foot hitting the wet pavement. It is a slow, agonizingly public journey. They must walk from the church gate, through the heart of the village, to the market cross and back again. In our modern world, shame is a private thing. It is a feeling we hide in the pit of our stomach, a thought we try to push away at 3 a.m. But here, in this older world, shame was architecture. It was spatial. It was something you had to physically move through, step by heavy step. As the penitent walks, look closely at what they are carrying. Sometimes it is a heavy wax candle, the flame struggling to stay alight in the breeze, a symbol of the light of truth they had tried to hide. But sometimes the community's imagination turned darker and more creative. Here is the historical fact that transforms this scene from a tragedy into a strange, surreal tableau. The authorities wanted the punishment to fit the crime, but they also wanted it to be legible. They wanted the sin to be written on the body. So look at the symbol attached to the penitent's chest, or perhaps painted on a wooden placard hanging from their neck. It is the shape of a fish. A fishtail. It seems absurd to us. A child's drawing used to mark a destroyed life. But in the visual language of the time, the fish represented the slip and slide of adultery, the cold blood of lust. Or perhaps they are made to wear a hat of straw, marking them as light and easily swayed by the wind. The penitent becomes a living hieroglyph. They are no longer a neighbor, a baker, or a weaver. They are a story. They are a warning. And the crowd watches. This is the heaviest part of the scene. There is no shouting. There are no rotten vegetables thrown. That is the stuff of movies. In reality, the punishment was the silence. The village is a small, tightly woven knot of families. Everyone knows everyone. The eyes watching the penitent belong to their cousins, their customers, the people they grew up with. His silence is the sound of a community drawing a line. It is the sound of the social fabric knitting itself back together by pushing one thread to the outside. Imagine the feeling of that gaze. It is heavier than the wooden placard. It is colder than the stones underfoot. But as you watch from the safety of history, try to understand the fear that built this ritual. They did not punish simply to be cruel. They punished because they were terrified of chaos. They believed that a broken rule was like a crack in a dam. If you ignored it, the whole structure would collapse, and the floods would come. The public humiliation was their way of patching the crack. It was a desperate attempt to say, *, we are still here. The rules still work. The world is still orderly. * sometimes. This need for order spilled over into the theater itself. Imagine a stage set up on a cart during a fair. Actors in grotesque masks perform a morality play. They mock the adulterer, the lecherous priest, the nagging wife. The crowd laughs. It is a release valve. By turning sin into a joke, they take away its power. By laughing at the devil on stage, they feel a little less afraid of the devil in the dark. The penitent reaches the end of the square. They turn. They begin the long walk back to the church doors. Their feet are muddied. The candle has burned low, hot wax dripping onto their hand. They are shivering, not just from the cold, but from the adrenaline of exposure. And then it is over. They step back into the shadow of the church. The doors close with a final resonant boom that signifies the end of the performance. The crowd exhales. The tension breaks. Slowly, the villagers unclasp their arms. They turn to one another and begin to speak in low voices. The market stalls will be set up soon. The chickens will be let out. Life will resume. The shame has been paid. The debt is settled. There is a strange, melancholy peace in the aftermath. The square is empty again. The rain begins to fall harder, washing the mud from the cobblestones, erasing the footprints of the sinner. You can feel the distance between you and them. You are not standing on the cold stone. You are not holding the candle. You are not wearing the fishtail. You are safe in the warmth of your own privacy. In our time, we have forgotten the fishtails and the white sheets. We have forgotten the need to drag our secrets through the town square. We allow ourselves the mercy of anonymity. Let the image of the procession fade. Let the gray light of the medieval morning soften into the twilight of your own room. The judgment of the crowd has dissolved into the mist. The bell has stopped tolling. The village is quiet now. The stones are clean. The past has done its work, and it demands nothing more from you. You are free to turn away from the window, to lie back, and to let the rain wash everything away. There is one final object we must examine before we leave this history behind. A heavy, rusting thing made of iron that sits in a glass case in the back of your mind. A legend that feels as cold and unforgiving as the dungeon floor. Walk with me into the armory. The air here is still, and smells of old grease, cold stone, and the metallic tang of things that have been forgotten. Swords hang on the walls like sleeping snakes. Shields are stacked in the corner, their painted heraldry chipped and fading into the shadows. And there, displayed on a wooden mannequin, is the object of our curiosity. The chastity belt. You have seen it in cartoons. You have heard the jokes about knights locking up their wives before riding off to the Crusades, taking the key with them to the Holy Land. It is a powerful image. It speaks of a possessiveness so extreme it became mechanical. It suggests a world where trust was non-existent and the human body was a fortress to be besieged or defended. But reach out and touch the metal in your imagination. Run your finger over the rough, pitted surface. It is crude. It is sharp. It is heavy. And here, in the quiet of the armory, history whispers a secret to you. It is a lie. The heavy iron contraption you are picturing, it is a fake, a forgery. Most of the examples sitting in museums today were made in the 19th century. Victorian fantasies projected backward onto the medieval world. They were made to shock, to titillate, to confirm the idea that the past was a barbaric, brutal place. The truth is softer, but perhaps more profound. There were no iron panties. There were no keys carried across deserts. The medieval world was cruel, yes, but it was also practical. They knew that iron rusts against skin. They knew that the body cannot be caged like a prisoner without consequence. They knew that a lock can be picked and a key can be copied. But just because the iron wasn't real doesn't mean the belt didn't exist. The true chastity belt was not made of metal. It was made of words. It was made of shame. It was made of the watchful eyes of the village, the whispers in the market, the threat of the fishtail placard we saw in the square. The poets of the time wrote about girdles of chastity, but they were speaking in metaphors. They were talking about loyalty. They were talking about a woman's honor, binding her more tightly than any chain could. Think of how much heavier that is. Iron can be broken. A lock can be smashed. But a belief system? That is forged in the fire of the mind, and it is almost impossible to take off. This is the real weight of history. It is not the armor, or the stone walls. It is the invisible pressure to be good, to be pure, to be obedient. It is a pressure that has lasted far longer than the metal would have. But look at the object in the armory again. Knowing what you know now, it seems almost silly, doesn't it? A clumsy, jagged thing that belongs in a theater prop room, not a history book. It loses its power when you know it is a fake dot, and in that realization, there is a release dot. We have spent this night walking through the architecture of control. We saw the penitentials, those endless lists of rules for kissing and touching. We saw the wandering womb and the sparrow brains. We saw the public shame of the market square. And what was the result of all that effort? What was the result of all that fear? People loved anyway. The couple in the hayloft still held hands. The priest still found warmth by his fire. The knight and the lady still shared a glance that said everything without saying a word. The control they tried to exert, the laws, the inspections, the myths, was never total. It was always a little bit absurd. It was always failing against the simple, stubborn reality of being human. The historical fact is that desire is like water. You can build a dam of stone. You can build a dam of shame. You can build a dam of iron myths. But the water will always, eventually, find a way through. It will seep through the cracks. It will flow over the top. It will wear the stone down to sand. The iron belt represents the impossible desire to lock up human nature. And it sits here, rusting, a monument to a battle that was lost before it began. And you can put it down now. You can walk out of the armory. You can leave the swords and the shields in the dark. You do not need armor to sleep. You do not need a key to unlock your own peace. The metal is cold, but you are warm. The past is rigid, but you are soft. The heavy doors of history are closing, one by one. The village is gone. The castle is a ruin. The voices of the judges and the priests are silent. The penance parades have stopped marching. The books of sin are closed and gathering dust. There is nothing left to guard. There is nothing left to prove. There is only the quiet. There is only the dark. There is only you, drifting further and further away from the iron myths, into the soft, weightless freedom of sleep. The struggle is over. The night has won, and the night is kind. As we step back from these ancient echoes, the heavy stone walls dissolve into the gray mist of time. We realize now that for all their fears of judgment, of fire and brimstone, their lives were steered by the same heavy, human pulse that beats within us all. The sermons have long since ended. The tallow candles have drowned in their own wax pools. The rules were written in ink, rigid and cold, but life was always lived warmly in the shadows. There is a comfort in knowing that the night has always kept secrets, and the vast, indifferent stars have always watched over the sleeping world. If this journey through the quiet corners of history brought you a moment of stillness, please leave a gentle like and subscribe to wander with me again. Before you close your eyes completely, anchor your mind with one final thought in the comments. The past is silent, and I am at rest. Leave the history in the dark, where it belongs. You are safe here in the present. Drift away now. Good night.